Hello and welcome to the Political Frontline. My special guest today is not only gorgeous woman, but she is also Executive Director of the American Center for European Ukraine, Alexa Chopivsky. Hi, Alexa.
Thank you for having me, Denise.
Welcome to the Political Frontline.
Thank you.
Alexa, let's talk about the organization which you are head, about the American Center for European Ukraine. What is the mission of this organization?
Our mission is to educate and to inform key decision makers, key influencers in Washington and indeed the greater United States about Ukraine's political and economic progress towards Europe.
Does it successful?
So far, we think it has been successful. We are a young organization, but so far, we've been working towards our goal.
What kind of activities do you do usually, of course?
So we communicate through various channels. For example, we publish a twice-monthly bulletin, which reaches currently over 15,000 key influencers in the United States and indeed around the globe, which informs our readers about the situation in Ukraine and about Ukraine's trajectory towards Europe. We have original content in our bulletin that's written by legislators, policymakers, journalists, other top experts from Ukraine and from the United States. We also, in addition to our bulletin, we organize events in order to raise Ukraine's profile in Washington, D.C.
Alexa, I know that 2 weeks ago, nearly 2 weeks ago, you have organized a meeting or event in U.S. Congress on Ukraine, which includes two sessions, the business, right? And the exhibition. What was your motivation to create such kind of events?
We, the American Center for European Ukraine, organized this two-day event in Congress with the U.S.-Ukraine Business Council and with our host, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur. She is a congresswoman, a longtime congresswoman from the state of Ohio, and she has been a big champion of Ukraine's in Congress ever since she was elected, especially over the last year and a half. And in fact, her grandparents are from Ukraine. So the three of us collaborated and organized this two-day event in Congress, and our motivation was to hold it there so that we would have accessibility, easy access to these key influencers, and to invest them in Ukraine, and to keep Ukraine hot, to keep it a priority, keep it on their radar screens. As you can imagine, U.S. Congress has many priorities and is pulled in many directions, but we wanted to do it there precisely for this reason. We gathered together a very interesting, diverse group of kind of key influencers, legislators, policymakers, business people, and brought them to Congress for 2 days. The first day consisted of an exhibition, Maidan, Ukraine, Road to Freedom, that was curated and initiated by Serhiy Fomenko, or Foma, the lead singer of the band Mandre. And with the help of the Dar Foundation, he collected artifacts from Maidan. He put together photographs, paintings, music, film from Maidan. He put this all together into this exhibit, which has traveled to the Checkpoint Charlie Museum in Berlin, for example. It's been to London already. It was in New York, it was in Los Angeles, and now we brought it to Washington, to U.S. Congress.
Was it interesting for all congressmen or not? Or it was some VIP specials invited?
Well, we had some VIPs there, but this was meant, you know, we cast a wide net in terms of who attended. And again, we had the exhibit opening, and we had several congressmen come and speak about their work in Ukraine. We had a Senator Ted Cruz, spoke in support of Ukraine, and as you know, he recently, just 4 days after our event, he announced that he's running for president. He's a Republican senator from Texas, and he's a big supporter of Ukraine. So they all spoke, and then the next day we had a business forum where we brought together top leaders from business, from the U.S., from Ukraine, who all work with Ukraine, who all have a deep commitment to Ukraine, deep expertise in Ukraine. And we brought these people together to discuss real steps for cooperation and for implementation in terms of doing business in Ukraine, improving the business climate, what needs to be done, bringing foreign investment into Ukraine.
Alexa, how are you interested in Ukrainian affairs?
Actually, my family is originally from Ukraine. I have roots in Ukraine from both sides of my family. After World War II, my family came to the United States, but they always maintained their love for their homeland. My mother's father in Chicago, for example, he established a Ukrainian newspaper, and he remained journalistically and politically active for the rest of his life. My father's parents, my father's family, when they came to their new village in Illinois, every year they would create an exhibition of Ukrainian culture in order to introduce their American neighbors to Ukraine. So these values were passed on to my brother and to me. And as a result, I've always felt a deep affinity for Ukraine and a deep respect for Ukraine and a great loyalty to this country.
Do you feel that you are Ukrainian?
I do. I do.
Alexa, I know that on the previous week you had or on this week you had a marvelous lecture at the Institute of International Relations. Can you tell me about this meeting, about this event? What was your impression?
I was very impressed by the students at the university, and we had an interesting kind of conversation, I would say, about cultural diplomacy in general, about Ukraine advocacy in the United States and in Congress. We had a discussion about a comparative discussion with the situation in Georgia and how under Saakashvili, his key ministers, you know, I remember traveling as a journalist to Georgia and interviewing some ministers in Tbilisi. They were all, 30 years old, all spoke perfect English in addition to Georgian, Russian, and probably one or two other languages. They had all either studied overseas or worked overseas or worked for some sort of international organization in Georgia. And it showed. They were modern, they were progressive, they were European, they were eager to make reforms. And Saakashvili had this vision for reforms, and it was these young people that actually executed these reforms and made them successful. So we had an interesting discussion about the importance, wherever you're from in the world, about the importance of leaving your comfort zone, going to another country, experiencing another system and another way of doing things, and bringing the best of what you learned, leaving the rest, because you'll not love everything that you see and that you learn, but bringing the best of what you learn back to your country and back to your community and acting as a seed and spreading that know-how and those best practices and that knowledge.
Do you believe that these changes that was in Georgia soon will be in Ukraine?
I do believe that this is the best chance in Ukraine's modern recent history for Ukraine to make reforms in terms of the political will, in terms of the people that are in positions of power now. I do believe so, that if ever there was a time, it's now. Of course, it's up to the people of Ukraine and to the leadership to see those through.
A short question about advocacy. How do you think what Ukraine should do on the international arena to make international support more stronger and more valuable?
Information is key. With the American Center for European Ukraine, part of our mission is to just counter all of the other sources of information that are flying out there. As you know, there's an information war going on, and a lot of this information is not fact-checked, it's not true, but it's out there in the public space, and that is dangerous. And so part of our mission is to counter that. So one way perhaps the Ukrainian government could help with that effort in terms of coordinating key messages coming out of Ukraine and coordinating those around the world.
Alexa, how can we assess the Russian actions toward Ukraine? Can we name the Russia as aggressor?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you have maybe your own, as an international affairs expert, do you have your own key success how to defeat this aggression?
I don't have the answer to that. I don't. But the U.S. for sure while it has supported Ukraine, and Ukraine is a friend and ally, the U.S. can and should be doing more. It passed the Ukraine Freedom Support Act in both the House and the Senate at the end of 2014. Now those elements need to be brought to fruition. They need to be seen through. There needs to be a political will to push those elements through.
What places does Ukraine question have in the U.S. foreign policy?
There is broad bipartisan support for Ukraine in the U.S. Congress. The challenge lies currently with the executive and with the president.
Can we say that Democrats and either Republicans support Ukraine?
We can. There is broad bipartisan support. Both parties support Ukraine.
Does the U.S. government consider Russian aggression as a local conflict, or it's like a world conflict?
I think they realize that this is actually a world conflict, and that the entire security of the European continent is at stake.
How real is this threat, on your opinion? Will Putin go further to the Crimea, to the Europe?
If unchecked, I do believe that Putin will not stop with Ukraine. Yes.
So this is like a small piece of bread. Yes. I want to say that Ukraine are very grateful to the U.S. for support and for protectorate in the finance sphere. But still, many analysts, including from USA, say that it is not enough and some other sorts of support should be provided to Ukraine, including military. What is your opinion on this question?
I think that the U.S. should be providing defensive weapons to Ukraine. The U.S. has not only a moral obligation to protect its friends and allies around the world, but in this case with Ukraine, it has a legal obligation with, as you know, the Budapest Memorandum.
And what kinds of obstacles Obama's administration faces? Well,
they have not to date made this decision to provide defensive weapons,
so
but it is a active question.
So we will continue our next interview in our second part of the interview. My special guest today is Executive Director of the American Center for European Ukraine, Alexa Chopivsky. Alexa, what UA policy regarding Crimea should be?
The U.S. policy regarding Crimea should be that they do not currently and they will never recognize the annexation of Crimea by Russia.
By the way, do you believe in diplomacy?
I do believe in diplomacy.
You believe in diplomacy. And diplomacy, do you think that this conflict can be overtaken by only diplomacy or with power?
I think that as a matter of urgency, the U.S. Congress should pass a resolution stating that it will never recognize the annexation of Crimea by Russia. And if they do that, then there could be some domino effect results in terms of with the UN and et cetera. But they need to pass an official resolution stating so.
Can you name some tendencies in Russia these days that can give us some hope that the situation will improve?
That the situation
will improve, with the society in Russia, with Russia foreign policy and so on.
History has shown that dictators cannot last. Maidan has shown that the will of the people here in Ukraine, it was an unbelievable story. The people fought a corrupt dictator and the people won. It's an incredible story. And that story is also one of Putin's worst nightmares, and he does not want to see that happening in his own country. But as the economic situation worsens, etc., we'll see whether the Russian people will accept the current situation.
What are your plans for the future in all spheres of activity? I mean, in sphere of the American Center for European Ukraine.
In terms of the American Center for European Ukraine, we will continue to advocate for Ukraine in the United States, in Washington in particular, and to raise Ukraine's profile. We'd also, the plans with Transnational Education Group is to further develop our educational exchange programs, our leadership development programs for promising young Ukrainian students and young professionals in the United States.
And now let's talk about Transnational Education Group. I know that you had many lectures during your visit to Ukraine. Tell us about a few words.
We spoke about a wide array of topics, including advocacy, U.S. advocacy for Ukraine. We also spoke about the importance of cultural diplomacy and international education exchange, and how these people-to-people connections really, at the grassroots level, really can make a difference. And we talked about how, at these university lectures, we talked about how the future of our countries rests on their shoulders, and about the importance of development and going overseas and seeing other systems and other ways of doing things and bringing that back to your home country. We discussed at length this topic, and with Transnational Education Group, that is our main goal, to broaden the worldview of our students, to expose them to opportunities that they may not even have considered for themselves before. While our students are in Washington and New York, we meet with leaders across various professional spheres. From the World Bank and the IFC to Georgetown University, we go and observe a class and meet with professors afterwards. We meet with journalists who mentor our students in journalism. We meet with congressmen's offices with their staff, their 20-something staffers, and discuss their responsibilities in the office, what topics they cover, how they got to where they are. It's a great opportunity for our young people to get concrete advice, to ask these leaders, how did you get to where you are today? What obstacles did you have to overcome? What advice would you give a young person who wants to become a diplomat or a journalist, for example?
What's your personal feeling from the Ukrainian reforms? Do you have any feeling about this?
Until recently, it had been a year since Yanukovych left, and no major reforms had been passed through. But again, as I said earlier, it seems like a great team is in place at the top, and time will tell.
By the way, can you tell or can you name the major assets of the reform? Is it people?
I think people are key.
People are the
It's so important to find good people to lead these reforms. And I know that your contemporaries have started an organization that helps kind of recruit talented young Ukrainians, late 20-somethings and in their 30s, who have gotten a lot of international experience and who have returned to Ukraine to kind of share that experience. 5 years ago, those people did not have opportunities to serve. But that has changed, and that's been, in my personal opinion, a major accomplishment of the new government, is promoting those talented young people.
What is your recipe for Ukraine that Ukraine, in short term, could be the strong country? Do you have such recipe or not?
I think the economy is very important. Economic reforms, and of course, there's the war in the East that needs to end.
So on that positive note, thanks for being on Political Frontline.
Thank you for having me.